Hello and welcome to this next um, video for Easy 104 topics. This one is for role-based access management in Microsoft cloud environments. So this is in this we will go through some of the main concepts for role-based access management and a comparative analysis of Azure RBAC and Microsoft EntraID roles. Okay. So in cloud computing, it has redefined the access control strategies. There are different ways to manage access of the users and also other systems. Right. So um, there are two ways, mainly two ways in Microsoft Azure. There are two frameworks. One is Azure RBAC, which is role-based access control, and Microsoft Entra ID roles. Okay, so there are two ways to manage the access using roles in Microsoft Azure. Now, understanding both of these are important to ensure security, efficiency, and compliance. Okay. Okay. Now, Azure role-based access control, it is a authorization model within Azure Resource Manager. Um, and it helps with authorization. It manages access based on the hierarchy. So there are different hierarchies. One is management group, subscription, resource group, resource. So we have different hierarchies to um, manage the access, okay, using role-based access control. It can be at the management group level, it can be at the subscription level, it can be at the resource group level, or it can be at the resource level. It supports granular access control across Azure resources. So it helps with different levels of access. So we can control access at a very granular level, or we can give access at a broader level. So it helps with that. There are built-in Azure roles we can use directly. There are over 120 built-in roles for common tasks. Um, One of them is like owner, which is a full access, including role delegation. Okay, there can be an owner role which can give a full which is like a full access. It can have full access over the environment, whole environment, Azure environment, and it can the owner role will also have access to give roles to other users. Okay. Contributor role is like managing resources without assigning roles. So contributor role is like you can go into Azure and you can manage different resources, but you will not have access to give roles to other users. Reader access is like it is a view only access. It is just to go and check the Azure environment and your resources there, but you cannot edit or you cannot change things over there. So it is a reader view only access role. Okay, and last one is user access administrator. So it can manage access assignments. So it can manage the different kind of accesses given to the users. So it can assign a role to a user. So user access administrator have the permission to give access for a role to different users. Okay, so that is for Azure roles, built-in Azure roles. Custom role creation in Azure RBAC is easy. Like you can define permissions with different keys, like there can be actions, there can be not actions, there can be data actions, there can be not data actions. So using this, we can define permission, which will allow us to create a Azure RBAC. Okay. Example of this is like allowing a read write to storage, but blocking a delete. Okay, so we can allow a read write to the storage using some permissions, but we can stop the deletion of for Azure RBAC. Custom rules support unique business policies. So we can have custom rules to support unique business policies. Um, so we can have different kind of rules created. So not only the built-in ones, but we can have custom rules to support unique business policies. Three key components for Azure RBAC role assignments are security principle. So we should have a security principle. We should have a role definition to assign it to a security principle. And then we should have a scope level, like we should be able to identify the scope, whether we want to assign a role at the resource level or at a resource group level or at a subscription level or at a management group level. So we should have these three components when assigning role. One is at the security principle. We should have a security principle. We should have a role definition, and we should have a scope. And we should be able to identify the scope. We should be able to create a role or select a role and then assign that role for that scope using portal or a CLI or a PowerShell. Okay. Microsoft EntraID rules. So there are directory level access control within tenant. We can have directory level access controls. One is that it controls identity, user management, security, and compliance. So we can have Entra ID rules. It can be at the directory level, at the tenant level. Okay, so this is different than RBAC, resource-based access control. This is at the directory level access control. Okay, and for a tenant, and it controls identity, user management, security, and compliance for Azure. Okay, and it applies for a tenant wide. Entra ID rules, it applies for a tenant wide. It is not resource specific, so it applies for a complete tenant. Okay. Global administrator, full access is given to global administrators for Azure tenant. So there will be full global administrator, full access. There will be user administrators, manage users and groups. There can be compliance administrator, monitor compliance settings, and there can be a security reader. So view only access to security groups. Okay, so these are different Entra ID rules: global administrator, user administrator, compliance administrator, and security reader. Okay. Like in RBAC, we can also create custom rules in Entra ID. So we can define precise permissions for identity needs. We can create using Entra Admin Center. We can create the rules using Entra Admin Center or Microsoft Graph API. So Entra Admin Center we can set up using for an Entra ID. We can set up a rule, or we can also use an API and set up a rule in Entra ID. We can assign to users, or and that role we will be able to assign to users or role enabled groups, and that role we can assign to users and or role enabled groups. And this role assignment in Entra ID, we can assign it to individual users or role enabled groups. Okay, so we can do at these two levels mainly, users or role enabled groups. And the steps are that we select a user or group and we choose a role and we assign via admin center or API. So there are two ways to assign it: admin center or API. Okay. So in conclusion, Azure RBAC and Entra ID rules complement each other. So we can create both kind of roles and they will complement each other in Azure environment. Azure RBAC controls access to Azure resources. Um, they can um, have different kind of accesses to Azure resources. Entra ID rules manages identity and directory access. So if we have Entra ID rules, we will manage identity and directory access. Okay. And if you want to control access at a resource level, then we'll go with control access to Azure resources using Azure RBAC. And if you want to manage identity and directory access, then we'll go with Entra ID rules. Proper use resources, security and operational clarity. Proper use of roles will ensure security and give us operational efficiency. Okay. So the main differences between Azure RBAC and Entra ID are mentioned here. So the scope of Azure RBAC is at the resource level, like a virtual machine or a database, and the scope of Entra ID rules are at a tenant level, which will be a complete directory level. Okay. Um, Focus of Azure RBAC is mainly to access control for Azure services and infrastructure. And for Microsoft Entra ID, it will be identity, security, and user management. Okay, so it can be at these levels, identity or user management levels. Role types will be 120 plus built-in custom rules for Azure RBAC, and here it will be 60 plus built-in roles for Microsoft Entra ID. Assignment targets, users, groups, and service principals um, will be the assignment targets for these roles. Okay, and for Microsoft Entra ID rules, it will be users or groups. Okay. Management tools. So we can use Azure Portal, CLI, PowerShell as a management tool for Azure RBAC. And for Microsoft Entra ID, we can use Entra Admin Center or Graph API to manage the roles. Okay. So these are the main concepts and points for Azure RBAC and Entra ID roles. Hope you liked the video. Thank you for your time.